The Vedanta in all its phases. Delivered in Calcutta. Away back, where no recorded history, nay, not even the dim light of tradition, can penetrate, has been steadily shining the light, sometimes dimmed by external circumstances, at others effulgent, but undying and steady, shading its luster not only over India, but permeating the whole thought world with its power, silent, unperceived, gentle, yet omnipotent, like the dew that falls in the morning, unseen and unnoticed, yet bringing into bloom the fairest of roses. This has been the thought of the Upanishads, the philosophy of the Vedanta. Nobody knows when it first came to flourish on the soil of India. Guesswork has been vain. The guesses, especially of Western writers, have been so conflicting that no certain date can be ascribed to them. But we Hindus, from the spiritual standpoint, do not admit that they had any origin. This Vedanta, the philosophy of the Upanishads, I would make bold to state, has been the first as well as the final thought on the spiritual plane that has ever been vouchsafed to man. From this ocean of the Vedanta, waves of light from time to time have been going westward and eastward. In the days of yore it travelled westward and gave its impetus to the mind of the Greeks, either in Athens, or in Alexandria, or in Antioch. The Sankhya system must clearly have made its mark on the minds of the ancient Greeks, and the Sankhya and all other systems in India hail that one authority, the Upanishads, the Vedanta. In India, too, in spite of all these jarring sects that we see today and all those that have been in the past, the one authority, the basis of all these systems, has yet been the Upanishads, the Vedanta. Whether you are a dualist, or a qualified monist, an Advaitist, or a Vishishtadvaitist, a Shuddhadvaitist, or any other Advaitist, or Dvaitist, or whatever you may call yourself, there stand behind you as authority, your Shastras, your scriptures, the Upanishads. Whatever system in India does not obey the Upanishads cannot be called orthodox, and even the systems of the Jains and the Buddhists have been rejected from the soil of India only because they did not bear allegiance to the Upanishads. Thus the Vedanta, whether we know it or not, has penetrated all the sects in India, and what we call Hinduism, this mighty banyan with its immense, almost infinite ramifications, has been throughout interpenetrated by the influence of the Vedanta. Whether we are conscious of it or not, we think the Vedanta, we live in the Vedanta, we breathe the Vedanta, and we die in the Vedanta, and every Hindu does that. To preach Vedanta in the land of India, and before an Indian audience, seems, therefore, to be an anomaly. But it is the one thing that has to be preached, and it is the necessity of the age that it must be preached. For, as I have just told you, all the Indian sects must bear allegiance to the Upanishads, but among these sects there are many apparent contradictions. Many times the great sages of yore themselves could not understand the underlying harmony of the Upanishads. Many times, even sages quarreled, so much so that it became a proverb that there are no sages who do not differ. But the time requires that a better interpretation should be given to this underlying harmony of the Upanishadic texts, whether they are dualistic, or non-dualistic, quasi-dualistic, or so forth. That has to be shown before the world at large, and this work is required as much in India as outside of India, and I, through the grace of God, had the great good fortune to sit at the feet of one whose whole life was such an interpretation, whose life, 1,000-fold more than whose teaching, was a living commentary on the texts of the Upanishads, was in fact the spirit of the Upanishads living in a human form. Perhaps I have got a little of that harmony. I do not know whether I shall be able to express it or not. But this is my attempt, my mission in life, to show that the Vedantic schools are not contradictory, that they all necessitate each other, all fulfill each other, and one, as it were, is the stepping stone to the other until the goal, the Advait, the Tattvam Asi, is reached. There was a time in India when the Karma Kanda had its sway. There are many grand ideals, no doubt, in that portion of the Vedas. Some of our present daily worship is still according to the precepts of the Karma Kanda. But with all that, the Karma Kanda of the Vedas has almost disappeared from India. Very little of our life today is bound and regulated by the orders of the Karma Kanda of the Vedas. In our ordinary lives, we are mostly Pauranikas or Tantrikas, and even where some Vedic texts are used by the Brahmins of India, the adjustment of the texts is mostly not according to the Vedas, but according to the Tantras or the Puranas. As such, to call ourselves Vedikas in the sense of following the Karma Kanda of the Vedas, I do not think would be proper. But the other fact stands that we are all of us Vedantists. The people who call themselves Hindus had better be called Vedantists, and as I have shown you, under that one name Vedantika come in all our various sects, whether dualists or non-dualists. The sects that are at the present time in India come to be divided in general into the two great classes of dualists and monists. The little differences which some of these sects insist upon, and upon the authority of which want to take new names as pure Advaitists, or qualified Advaitists, and so forth, do not matter much. As a classification, either they are dualists or monists, and of the sects existing at the present time, some of them are very new, and others seem to be reproductions of very ancient sects. The one class I would present by the life and philosophy of Ramanuj, and the other by Shankaracharya. Ramanuj is the leading dualistic philosopher of later India, whom all the other dualistic sects have followed, directly or indirectly, both in the substance of their teaching and in the organization of their sects, even down to some of the most minute points of their organization. You will be astonished if you compare Ramanuj and his work with the other dualistic Vaishnav sects in India to see how much they resemble each other in organization, teaching, and method. There is the great southern preacher Madhva Muni, and following him, our great Chaitanya of Bengal, who took up the philosophy of the Madhvas and preached it in Bengal. There are some other sects also in southern India, as the qualified dualistic Shaivas. The Shaivas in most parts of India are Advaitists, except in some portions of southern India and in Ceylon. But they also only substitute Shiva for Vishnu, and are Ramanujists in every sense of the term except in the doctrine of the soul. The followers of Ramanuj hold that the soul is Anu, like a particle, very small, and the followers of Shankaracharya hold that it is Vibhu, omnipresent. There have been several non-dualistic sects. It seems that there have been sects in ancient times which Shankara's movement has entirely swallowed up and assimilated. You find sometimes a fling at Shankara himself in some of the commentaries, especially in that of Vijnana Bhikshu, who, although an Advaitist, attempts to upset the Mayavada of Shankara. It seems there were schools who did not believe in this Mayavada, and they went so far as to call Shankara a crypto-Buddhist, Prachanna Bodha, and they thought this Mayavada was taken from the Buddhists and brought within the Vedantic fold. However that may be, in modern times the Advaitists have all ranged themselves under Shankaracharya and his disciples have been the great preachers of Advait both in southern and in northern India. The influence of Shankaracharya did not penetrate much into our country of Bengal and in Kashmir and the Punjab. But in southern India the Smartas are all followers of Shankaracharya, and with Varanasi as the center, his influence is simply immense even in many parts of northern India. Now both Shankara and Ramanuj laid aside all claim to originality. Ramanuj expressly tells us he is only following the great commentary of Bodhayana. Ancient teachers abridged that extensive commentary on the Brahma Sutras, which was composed by the Bhagavan Bodhayana. In accordance with their opinion, the words of the sutra are explained. That is what Ramanuj says at the beginning of his commentary, the Sri Bhashya. He takes it up and makes of it a samkshepa, and that is what we have today. I myself never had an opportunity of seeing this commentary of Bodhayana. The late Swami Dayananda Saraswati wanted to reject every other commentary of the Vyasa Sutras except that of Bodhayana, and although he never lost an opportunity of having a fling at Ramanuj, he himself could never produce the Bodhayana. I have sought for it all over India, and never yet have been able to see it. But Ramanuj is very plain on the point, and he tells us that he is taking the ideas and sometimes the very passages out of Bodhayana and condensing them into the present Ramanuj Bhashya. It seems that Shankaracharya was also doing the same. There are a few places in his Bhashya which mention older commentaries, and when we know that his Guru and his Guru's Guru had been Vedantists of the same school as he, sometimes Korn more thoroughgoing, bolder even than Shankara himself on certain points, it seems pretty plain that he also was not preaching anything very original, and that even in his Bhashya he himself had been doing the same work that Ramanuj did with Bodhayana, but from what Bhashya, it cannot be discovered at the present time. All these darshanas that you have ever seen or heard of are based upon Upanishadic authority. Whenever they want to quote a Shruti, they mean the Upanishads. They are always quoting the Upanishads. Following the Upanishads there come other philosophies of India, but every one of them failed in getting that hold on India which the philosophy of Vyasa got. Although the philosophy of Vyasa is a development out of an older one, the Sankhya, and every philosophy and every system in India, I mean throughout the world, owes much to Kapila, perhaps the greatest name in the history of India in psychological and philosophical lines. The influence of Kapila is everywhere seen throughout the world. Wherever there is a recognized system of thought, there you can trace his influence, even if it be thousands of years back, yet he stands there, the shining, glorious, wonderful Kapila. His psychology and a good deal of his philosophy have been accepted by all the sects of India with but very little differences. In our own country, our Nayayika philosophers could not make much impression on the philosophical world of India. They were too busy with little things like species and genus, and so forth, and that most cumbersome terminology, which it is a life's work to study. As such, they were very busy with logic and left philosophy to the Vedantists, but every one of the Indian philosophic sects in modern times has adopted the logical terminology of the Nayayikas of Bengal. Jagdisha, Gadadhar, and Shironi are as well known at Nadia as in some of the cities in Malabar. But the philosophy of Vyasa, the Vyasa Sutras, is firm-seated and has attained the permanence of that which it intended to present to men, the Brahman of the Vedantic side of philosophy. Reason was entirely subordinated to the Shrutis, and as Shankaracharya declares, Vyasa did not care to reason at all. His idea in writing the sutras was just to bring together, and with one thread to make a garland of the flowers of Vedantic texts. His sutras are admitted so far as they are subordinate to the authority of the Upanishads and no further. And as I have said, all the sects of India now hold these Vyasa Sutras to be the great authority, and every new sect in India starts with a fresh commentary on the Vyasa Sutras according to its light. The difference between some of these commentators is sometimes very great, sometimes the text torturing is quite disgusting. The Vyasa Sutras have got the place of authority, and no one can expect to found a sect in India until he can write a fresh commentary on the Vyasa Sutras. Next in authority is the celebrated Gita. The great glory of Shankaracharya was his preaching of the Gita. It is one of the greatest works that this great man did among the many noble works of his noble life, the preaching of the Gita and writing the most beautiful commentary upon it. And he has been followed by all founders of the orthodox sects in India, each of whom has written a commentary on the Gita. The Upanishads are many, and said to be 108, but some declare them to be still larger in number. Some of them are evidently of a much later date, as for instance, the Al-Upanishad in which Allah is praised and Muhammad is called the Rajasulla. I have been told that this was written during the reign of Akbar to bring the Hindus and Mohammedans together, and sometimes they got hold of some word, as Allah, or Illa in the Sanhitas, and made an Upanishad on it. So in this Al-Upanishad, Muhammad is the Rajasulla, whatever that may mean. There are other sectarian Upanishads of the same species, which you find to be entirely modern, and it has been so easy to write them, seeing that this language of the Sanhita portion of the Vedas is so archaic that there is no grammar to it. Years ago I had an idea of studying the grammar of the Vedas, and I began with all earnestness to study Panini and the Mahabhashya, but to my surprise I found that the best part of the Vedic grammar consists only of exceptions to rules. A rule is made, and after that comes a statement to the effect, this rule will be an exception. So you see what an amount of liberty there is for anybody to write anything, the only safeguard being the dictionary of Yaska. Still, in this you will find, for the must part, but a large number of synonyms. Given all that, how easy it is to write any number of Upanishads you please. Just have a little knowledge of Sanskrit, enough to make words look like the old archaic words, and you have no fear of grammar. Then you bring in Rajasulla or any other Sulla you like. In that way many Upanishads have been manufactured, and I am told that that is being done even now. In some parts of India, I am perfectly certain, they are trying to manufacture such Upanishads among the different sects. But among the Upanishads are those which, on the face of them, bear the evidence of genuineness, and these have been taken up by the great commentators and commented upon, especially by Shankara, followed by Ramanuj and all the rest. There are one or two more ideas with regard to the Upanishads which I want to bring to your notice, for these are an ocean of knowledge, and to talk about the Upanishads, even for an incompetent person like myself, takes years and not one lecture only. I want, therefore, to bring to your notice one or two points in the study of the Upanishads. In the first place, they are the most wonderful poems in the world. If you read the Sanhita portion of the Vedas, you now and then find passages of most marvelous beauty. For instance, the famous shloka which describes chaos, etc., when darkness was hidden in darkness, so on it goes. One reads and feels the wonderful sublimity of the poetry. Do you mark this that outside of India, and inside also, there have been attempts at painting the sublime. But outside, it has always been the infinite in the muscles, the external world, the infinite of matter or of space. When Milton or Dante, or any other great European poet, either ancient or modern, wants to paint a picture of the infinite, he tries to soar outside, to make you feel the infinite through the muscles. That attempt has been made here also. You find it in the Sanhitas, the infinite of extension most marvelously painted and placed before the readers, such as has been done nowhere else. Mark that one sentence, and now mark the description of darkness by three poets. Take our own Kalidasa, darkness which can be penetrated with the point of a needle, then Milton, no light but rather darkness visible, but come now to the Upanishad, darkness was covering darkness, darkness was hidden in darkness. We who live in the tropics can understand it, The sudden outburst of the monsoon, when in a moment the horizon becomes darkened and clouds become covered with more rolling black clouds. So on, the poem goes, but yet, in the Sanhita portion, all these attempts are external. As everywhere else, the attempts at finding the solution of the great problems of life have been through the external world. Just as the Greek mind or the modern European mind wants to find the solution of life and of all the sacred problems of being by searching into the external world, so also did our forefathers, and just as the Europeans failed, they failed also. But the Western people never made a move more, they remained there, they failed in the search for the solution of the great problems of life and death in the external world, and there they remained, stranded. Our forefathers also found it impossible, but were bolder in declaring the utter helplessness of the senses to find the solution. Nowhere else was the answer better put than in the Upanishad, from whence words come back reflected, together with the mind. There the eye cannot go, nor can speech reach. There are various sentences which declare the utter helplessness of the senses, but they did not stop there, they fell back upon the internal nature of man, they went to get the answer from their own soul. They became introspective, they gave up external nature as a failure, as nothing could be done there, as no hope, no answer could be found. They discovered that dull, dead matter would not give them truth, and they fell back upon the shining soul of man, and there the answer was found. Know this Atman alone, they declared, give up all other vain words, and hear no other. In the Atman they found the solution, the greatest of all Atmans, the God, the Lord of this universe, His relation to the Atman of man, our duty to Him, and through that our relation to each other. And herein you find the most sublime poetry in the world. No more is the attempt made to paint this Atman in the language of matter. Nay, for it they have given up even all positive language. No more is there any attempt to come to the senses to give them the idea of the infinite, no more is there an external, dull, dead, material, spacious, sensuous infinite, but instead of that comes something which is as fine as even that mentioned in the saying. What poetry in the world can be more sublime than this? There the sun cannot illumine, nor the moon, nor the stars, there this flash of lightning cannot illumine, what to speak of this mortal fire. Such poetry you find nowhere else. Take that most marvelous Upanishad, the Katha. What a wonderful finish, what a most marvelous art displayed in that poem. How wonderfully it opens with that little boy to whom Shraddha came, who wanted to see Yam, and how that most marvelous of all teachers, Death himself, teaches him the great lessons of life and death. And what was his quest? To know the secret of death. The second point that I want you to remember is the perfectly impersonal character of the Upanishads. Although we find many names, and many speakers, and many teachers in the Upanishads, not one of them stands as an authority of the Upanishads, not one verse is based upon the life of any one of them. These are simply figures like shadows moving in the background, unfelt, unseen, unrealized, but the real force is in the marvelous, the brilliant, the effulgent texts of the Upanishads, perfectly impersonal. If 20 Yajnavalkyas came and lived and died, it does not matter, the texts are there. And yet it is against no personality, it is broad and expansive enough to embrace all the personalities that the world has yet produced and all that are yet to come. It has nothing to say against the worship of persons, or avatars, or sages. On the other hand, it is always upholding it. At the same time, it is perfectly impersonal. It is a most marvelous idea, like the God it preaches, the impersonal idea of the Upanishads. For the sage, the thinker, the philosopher, for the rationalist, It is as much impersonal as any modern scientist can wish. And these are our scriptures. You must remember that what the Bible is to the Christians, what the Quran is to the Mohammedans, what the Tripitaka is to the Buddhist, what the Zend Avesta is to the Parsis, these Upanishads are to us. These and nothing but these are our scriptures. The Puranas, the Tantras and all the other books, even the Vyasa Sutras, are of secondary, tertiary authority, but primary are the Vedas. Manu and the Puranas, and all the other books are to be taken so far as they agree with the authority of the Upanishads, and when they disagree they are to be rejected without mercy. This we ought to remember always, but unfortunately for India, at the present time we have forgotten it. A petty village custom seems now the real authority, and not the teaching of the Upanishads. A petty idea current in a wayside village in Bengal seems to have the authority of the Vedas, and even something better. And that word, orthodox, how wonderful its influence! To the villager, the following of every little bit of the Karma Kanda is the very height of orthodoxy, and one who does not do it is told, "Go away, you are no more a Hindu." So there are, most unfortunately in my motherland, persons who will take up one of these tantras and say that the practice of this tantra is to be obeyed. He who does not do so is no more orthodox in his views. Therefore it is better for us to remember that in the Upanishads is the primary authority, even the Grihya and Shrota Sutras are subordinate to the authority of the Vedas. They are the words of the rishis, our forefathers, and you have to believe them if you want to become a Hindu. You may even believe the most peculiar ideas about the Godhead, but if you deny the authority of the Vedas, you are a Nastika. Therein lies the difference between the scriptures of the Christians or the Buddhists and ours. Theirs are all Puranas and not scriptures, because they describe the history of the deluge and the history of kings and reigning families, and record the lives of great men, and so on. This is the work of the Puranas, and so far as they agree with the Vedas, they are good. So far as the Bible and the scriptures of other nations agree with the Vedas, they are perfectly good, but when they do not agree, they are no more to be accepted. So with the Quran. There are many moral teachings in these, and so far as they agree with the Vedas they have the authority of the Puranas, but no more. The idea is that the Vedas were never written, the idea is they never came into existence. I was told once by a Christian missionary that their scriptures have a historical character and therefore are true, to which I replied, mine have no historical character and therefore they are true. Yours being historical, they were evidently made by some man the other day. Yours are man-made and mine are not. Their non-historicity is in their favor. Such is the relation of the Vedas with all the other scriptures at the present day. We now come to the teachings of the Upanishads. Various texts are there. Some are perfectly dualistic, while others are monistic. But there are certain doctrines which are agreed to by all the different sects of India. First, there is the doctrine of samsara or reincarnation of the soul. Secondly, they all agree in their psychology. First there is the body, behind that, what they call the sukshma sharira, the mind, and behind that even is the jiva. That is the great difference between Western and Indian psychology. In the Western psychology the mind is the soul, here it is not. The antakarna, the internal instrument, as the mind is called, is only an instrument in the hands of that jiva, through which the jiva works on the body or on the external world. Here they all agree, and they all also agree that this jiva or Atman, Jivatman as it is called by various sects, is eternal, without beginning, and that it is going from birth to birth, until it gets a final release. They all agree in this, and they also all agree in one other most vital point, which alone marks characteristically, most prominently, most vitally, the difference between the Indian and the Western mind, and it is this, that everything is in the soul. There is no inspiration, but properly speaking, expiration. All powers and all purity and all greatness, everything is in the soul. The yogi would tell you that the siddhis, anima, laghima, and so on that he wants to attain to are not to be attained in the proper sense of the word, but are already there in the soul. The work is to make them manifest. Patanjali, for instance, would tell you that even in the lowest worm that crawls under your feet, all the eightfold yogi's powers are already existing. The difference has been made by the body. As soon as it gets a better body, the powers will become manifest, but they are there. Good and bad deeds are not the direct causes in the transformations of nature, but they act as breakers of obstacles to the evolutions of nature, as a farmer breaks the obstacles to the course of water, which then runs down by its own nature. Here Patanjali gives the celebrated example of the cultivator bringing water into his field from a huge tank somewhere. The tank is already filled and the water would flood his land in a moment, only there is a mud wall between the tank and his field. As soon as the barrier is broken, in rushes the water out of its own power and force. This mass of power and purity and perfection is in the soul already. The only difference is the avrana, this veil that has been cast over it. Once the veil is removed, the soul attains to purity, and its powers become manifest. This, you ought to remember, is the great difference between Eastern and Western thought. Hence you find people teaching such awful doctrines as that we are all born sinners, and because we do not believe in such awful doctrines we are all born wicked. They never stop to think that if we are by our very nature wicked, we can never be good, for how can nature change? If it changes, it contradicts itself, it is not nature. We ought to remember this. Here the dualist and the Advaitist and all others in India agree. The next point, which all the sects in India believe in, is God. Of course their ideas of God will be different. The dualists believe in a personal God, and a personal only. I want you to understand this word personal a little more. This word personal does not mean that God has a body, sits on a throne somewhere, and rules this world, but means saguna, with qualities. There are many descriptions of the personal God. This personal God as the ruler, the creator, the preserver, and the destroyer of this universe is believed in by all the sects. The Advaitists believe something more. They believe in a still higher phase of this personal God, which is personal impersonal. No adjective can illustrate where there is no qualification, and the Advaitist would not give him any qualities except the three Satchitananda, existence, knowledge, and bliss absolute. This is what Shankara did. But in the Upanishads themselves you find they penetrate even further, and say, nothing can be predicated of it except neti, neti, not this, not this. Here all the different sects of India agree. But taking the dualistic side, as I have said, I will take Ramanuj as the typical dualist of India, the great modern representative of the dualistic system. It is a pity that our people in Bengal know so very little about the great religious leaders in India, who have been born in other parts of the country, and for the matter of that, during the whole of the Mohammedan period, with the exception of our Chaitanya, all the great religious leaders were born in southern India, and it is the intellect of southern India that is really governing India now, for even Chaitanya belonged to one of these sects, a sect of the Madhvas. According to Ramanuj, these three entities are eternal, God and soul and nature. The souls are eternal, and they will remain eternally existing, individualized through eternity, and will retain their individuality all through. Your soul will be different from my soul through all eternity, says Ramanuj, and so will this nature, which is an existing fact, as much a fact as the existence of soul or the existence of God remain always different. And God is interpenetrating, the essence of the soul. He is the Antaryamin. In this sense, Ramanuj sometimes thinks that God is one with the soul, the essence of the soul, and these souls, at the time of Pralaya, when the whole of nature becomes what he calls Sankuchita, contracted, become contracted and minute and remain so for a time. And at the beginning of the next cycle they all come out, according to their past karma, and undergo the effect of that karma. Every action that makes the natural inborn purity and perfection of the soul get contracted is a bad action, and every action that makes it come out and expand itself is a good action, says Ramanuj. Whatever helps to make the vikasha of the soul is good, and whatever makes it sankuchita is bad. And thus the soul is going on, expanding or contracting in its actions, till through the grace of God comes salvation. And that grace comes to all souls, says Ramanuj, that are pure and struggle for that grace. There is a celebrated verse in the Shrutis. When the food is pure, then the sattva becomes pure. When the sattva is pure, then the smriti, the memory of the Lord, or the memory of our own perfection, if you are an Advaitist, becomes truer, steadier, and absolute. Here is a great discussion. First of all, what is this sattva? We know that according to the Sankhya, and it has been admitted by all our sects of philosophy, the body is composed of three sorts of materials, not qualities. It is the general idea that sattva, rajas, and tamas are qualities. Not at all, not qualities, but the materials of this universe, and with ahara shuddhi, when the food is pure, the sattva material becomes pure. The one theme of the Vedanta is to get this sattva. As I have told you, the soul is already pure and perfect, and it is, according to the Vedanta, covered up by rajas and tamas particles. The sattva particles are the most luminous, and the effulgence of the soul penetrates through them as easily as light through glass. So if the rajas and tamas particles go, and leave the sattva particles, in this state the power and purity of the soul will appear and leave the soul more manifest. Therefore it is necessary to have this sattva. And the text says, when ahara becomes pure. Ramanuj takes this word ahara to mean food, and he has made it one of the turning points of his philosophy. Not only so, it has affected the whole of India and all the different sects. Therefore, it is necessary for us to understand what it means, for that, according to Ramanuj, is one of the principal factors in our life, ahara shuddhi. What makes food impure? Asks Ramanuj. Three sorts of defects make food impure. First, jati dosha, the defect in the very nature of the class to which the food belongs, as the smell in onions, garlic, and such like. The next is ashraya dosha, the defect in the person from whom the food comes. Food coming from a wicked person will make you impure. I myself have seen many great sages in India following strictly that advice all their lives. Of course they had the power to know who brought the food, and even who had touched the food, and I have seen it in my own life, not once, but hundreds of times. Then nimitta dosha, the defect of impure things or influences coming in contact with food is another. We had better attend to that a little more now. It has become too prevalent in India to take food with dirt and dust and bits of hair in it. If food is taken from which these three defects have been removed, that makes sattva shuddhi, purifies the sattva. Religion seems to be a very easy task then. Then everyone can have religion if it comes by eating pure food only. There is none so weak or incompetent in this world, that I know, who cannot save himself from these defects. Then comes Shankaracharya, who says this word ahara means thought collected in the mind. When that becomes pure, the sattva becomes pure, and not before that. You may eat what you like. If food alone would purify the sattva, then feed the monkey with milk and rice all its life, would it become a great yogi? Then the cows and the deer would be great yogis. As has been said, if it is by bathing much that heaven is reached, the fishes will get to heaven first. If by eating vegetables a man gets to heaven, the cows and the deer will get to heaven first. But what is the solution? Both are necessary. Of course, the idea that Shankaracharya gives us of ahara is the primary idea. But pure food, no doubt, helps pure thought. It has an intimate connection, both ought to be there. But the defect is that in modern India we have forgotten the advice of Shankaracharya and taken only the pure food meaning. That is why people get mad with me when I say, religion has got into the kitchen, and if you had been in Madras with me, you would have agreed with me. The Bengalis are better than that. In Madras they throw away food if anybody looks at it. And with all this, I do not see that the people are any the better there. If only eating this and that sort of food and saving it from the looks of this person and that person would give them perfection, you would expect them all to be perfect men, which they are not. Thus, although these are to be combined and linked together to make a perfect whole, do not put the cart before the horse. There is a cry nowadays about this and that food and about Varnashrama, and the Bengalis are the most vociferous in these cries. I would ask every one of you, what do you know about this Varnashrama? Where are the 4 castes today in this country? Answer me, I do not see the 4 castes. Just as our Bengali proverb has it, a headache without a head, so you want to make this Varnashrama here. There are not 4 castes here. I see only the Brahman and the Shudra. If there are the Kshatriyas and the Vaishyas, where are they, and why do not you Brahmans order them to take the Yagyokvita and study the Vedas, as every Hindu ought to do? And if the Vaishyas and the Kshatriyas do not exist, but only the Brahmans and the Shudras, the Shastras say that the Brahman must not live in a country where there are only Shudras, so depart bag and baggage. Do you know what the Shastras say about people who have been eating mlechcha food and living under a government of the Mlekkas, as you have for the past 1,000 years? Do you know the penance for that? The penance would be burning oneself with one's own hands. Do you want to pass as teachers and walk like hypocrisies? If you believe in your Shastras, burn yourselves first like the one great Brahman did who went with Alexander the Great and burnt himself because he thought he had eaten the food of a mlechcha. Do like that, and you will see that the whole nation will be at your feet. You do not believe in your own Shastras, and yet want to make others believe in them. If you think you are not able to do that in this age, admit your weakness and excuse the weakness of others, take the other castes up, give them a helping hand, let them study the Vedas and become just as good Aryans as any other Aryans in the world, and be you likewise Aryans, you Brahmans of Bengal. Give up this filthy Vamachara that is killing your country. You have not seen the other parts of India. When I see how much the Vamachara has entered our society, I find it a most disgraceful place with all its boast of culture. These Vamachara sects are honeycombing our society in Bengal. Those who come out in the daytime and preach most loudly about Achara, it is they who carry on the horrible debauchery at night and are backed by the most dreadful books. They are ordered by the books to do these things. You who are of Bengal know it. The Bengali Shastras are the Vamachara Tantras. They are published by the cartload, and you poison the minds of your children with them instead of teaching them your Shrutis. Fathers of Calcutta, do you not feel ashamed that such horrible stuff as these Vamachara Tantras, with translations too, should be put into the hands of your boys and girls, and their minds poisoned, and that they should be brought up with the idea that these are the Shastras of the Hindus? If you are ashamed, take them away from your children, and let them read the true Shastras, the Vedas, the Gita, the Upanishads. According to the dualistic sects of India, the individual souls remain as individuals throughout, and God creates the universe out of pre-existing material only as the efficient cause. According to the Advaitists, on the other hand, God is both the material and the efficient cause of the universe. He is not only the creator of the universe, but he creates it out of himself. That is the Advaitist position. There are crude dualistic sects who believe that this world has been created by God out of himself, and at the same time God is eternally separate from the universe, and everything is eternally subordinate to the ruler of the universe. There are sects too who also believe that out of himself God has evolved this universe, and individuals in the long run attain to nirvana to give up the finite and become the infinite. But these sects have disappeared. The one sect of Advaitists that you see in modern India is composed of the followers of Shankara. According to Shankara, God is both the material and the efficient cause through Maya, but not in reality. God has not become this universe, but the universe is not and God is. This is one of the highest points to understand of Advaita Vedanta, this idea of Maya. I am afraid I have no time to discuss this one most difficult point in our philosophy. Those of you who are acquainted with Western philosophy will find something very similar in Kant. But I must warn you, those of you who have studied Professor Max Müller's writings on Kant, that there is one idea most misleading. It was Shankara who first found out the idea of the identity of time, space, and causation with Maya, and I had the good fortune to find one or two passages in Shankara's commentaries and send them to my friend the professor. So even that idea was here in India. Now this is a peculiar theory, this Maya theory of the Advaita Vedantists. The Brahman is all that exists, but differentiation has been caused by this Maya. Unity, the one Brahman, is the ultimate, the goal, and herein is an eternal dissension again between Indian and Western thought. India has thrown this challenge to the world for thousands of years, and the challenge has been taken up by different nations, and the result is that they all succumbed and you live. This is the challenge, that this world is a delusion, that it is all Maya, that whether you eat off the ground with your fingers or dine off golden plates, whether you live in palaces and are one of the mightiest monarchs or are the poorest of beggars, death is the one result. It is all the same, all Maya. That is the old Indian theme, and again nations are springing up trying to unsay it, to disprove it, becoming great, with enjoyment as their watchword, power in their hands. They use that power to the utmost, enjoy to the utmost, and the next moment they die. We stand forever because we see that everything is Maya. The children of Maya live forever, but the children of enjoyment die. Here again is another great difference. Just as you find the attempts of Hegel and Schopenhauer in German philosophy, so you will find the very same ideas brought forward in ancient India. Fortunately for us, Hegelianism was nipped in the bud and not allowed to sprout and cast its baneful shoots over this motherland of ours. Hegel's one idea is that the one, the absolute, is only chaos, and that the individualized form is the greater. The world is greater than the non-world. Samsara is greater than salvation. That is the one idea, and the more you plunge into this samsara, the more your soul is covered with the workings of life, the better you are. They say, do you not see how we build houses, cleanse the streets, enjoy the senses? A. Behind that they may hide rancor, misery, horror behind every bit of that enjoyment. On the other hand, our philosophers have from the very first declared that every manifestation, what you call evolution, is vain, a vain attempt of the unmanifested to manifest itself. A. You the mighty cause of this universe, trying to reflect yourself in little mud puddles. But after making the attempt for a time you find out it was all in vain and beat a retreat to the place from whence you came. This is vairagya, or renunciation, and the very beginning of religion. How can religion or morality begin without renunciation itself? The alpha and omega is renunciation. Give up, says the Veda, give up. That is the one way, give up. Neither through wealth, nor through progeny, but by giving up alone that immortality is to be reached. That is the dictate of the Indian books. Of course, there have been great givers up of the world, even sitting on thrones. But even King Janka himself had to renounce, who was a greater renouncer than he? But in modern times we all want to be called Jankas. They are all Jankas, lit. Fathers of children, unclad, ill-fed, miserable children. The word Janka can be applied to them in that sense only. They have none of the shining, godlike thoughts as the old Janka had. These are our modern Jankas. A little less of this Janakism now, and come straight to the mark. If you can give up, you will have religion. If you cannot, you may read all the books that are in the world, from east to west, swallow all the libraries and become the greatest of Pandits, but if you have Karma Kanda only, you are nothing, there is no spirituality. Through renunciation alone this immortality is to be reached. It is the power, the great power, that cares not even for the universe, then it is that. The whole universe becomes like a hollow made by a cow's foot. Renunciation, that is the flag, the banner of India, floating over the world, the one undying thought which India sends again and again as a warning to dying races, as a warning to all tyranny, as a warning to wickedness in the world. Hindus, let not your hold of that banner go. Hold it aloft. Even if you are weak and cannot renounce, do not lower the ideal. Say, I am weak and cannot renounce the world, but do not try to be hypocrites, torturing texts, and making specious arguments, and trying to throw dust in the eyes of people who are ignorant. Do not do that, but own you are weak. For the idea is great, that of renunciation. What matters it if millions fail in the attempt, if 10 soldiers or even to return victorious? Blessed be the millions dead. Their blood has bought the victory. This renunciation is the one ideal throughout the different Vedic sects except one, and that is the Vallabhacharya sect in Bombay Presidency, and most of you are aware what comes where renunciation does not exist. We want orthodoxy, even the hideously orthodox, even those who smother themselves with ashes, even those who stand with their hands uplifted. We want them, unnatural though they be, for standing for that idea of giving up, and acting as a warning to the race against succumbing to the effeminate luxuries that are creeping into India, eating into our very vitals, and tending to make the whole race a race of hypocrites. We want to have a little of asceticism. Renunciation conquered India in days of yore, it has still to conquer India. Still it stands as the greatest and highest of Indian ideals, this renunciation. The land of Buddha, the land of Ramanuj, of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, the land of renunciation, the land where, from the days of yore, Karma Kanda was preached against, and even today there are hundreds who have given up everything and become Jivanmuktas. Will that land give up its ideals? Certainly not. There may be people whose brains have become turned by the Western luxurious ideals, there may be thousands and hundreds of thousands who have drunk deep of enjoyment, this curse of the West, the senses, the curse of the world, yet for all that, there will be other thousands in this motherland of mine to whom religion will ever be a reality, and who will be ever ready to give up without counting the cost, if need be. Another ideal very common in all our sects, I want to place before you. It is also a vast subject. This unique idea that religion is to be realized is in India alone. This Atman is not to be reached by too much talking, nor is it to be reached by the power of intellect, nor by much study of the scriptures. Nay, ours is the only scripture in the world that declares, not even by the study of the scriptures can the Atman be realized, not talks, not lecturing, none of that, but it is to be realized. It comes from the teacher to the disciple. When this insight comes to the disciple, everything is cleared up and realization follows. One more idea. There is a peculiar custom in Bengal, which they call Kulaguru or hereditary guruship. My father was your guru, now I shall be your guru. My father was the guru of your father, so shall I be yours. What is a guru? Let us go back to the Shrutis, he who knows the secret of the Vedas, not bookworms, not grammarians, not pandits in general, but he who knows the meaning. And as laden with a load of sandalwood knows only the weight of the wood, but not its precious qualities, so are these pandits. We do not want such. What can they teach if they have no realization? When I was a boy here, in this city of Calcutta, I used to go from place to place in search of religion, and everywhere I asked the lecturer after hearing very big lectures, "Have you seen God?" The man was taken aback at the idea of seeing God, and the only man who told me, "I have," was Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, and not only so, but he said, "I will put you in the way of seeing him too." The Guru is not a man who twists and tortures texts. Different ways of throwing out words, different ways of explaining texts of the scriptures, these are for the enjoyment of the learned, not for freedom. Shrotriya, he who knows the secret of the Shrutis, Avrijana, the sinless, and Akmehta, unpierced by desire, he who does not want to make money by teaching you, he is the Shanta, the Sadhu, who comes as the spring which brings the leaves and blossoms to various plants but does not ask anything from the plant, for its very nature is to do good. It does good and there it is. Such is the Guru, who has himself crossed this terrible ocean of life, and without any idea of gain to himself, helps others also to cross the ocean. This is the Guru, and mark that none else can be a Guru, for themselves steeped in darkness, but in the pride of their hearts, thinking they know everything, the fools want to help others, and they go round and round in many crooked ways, staggering to and fro, and thus like the blind leading the blind, both fall into the ditch. Thus say the Vedas. Compare that and your present custom. You are Vedantists, you are very orthodox, are you not? You are great Hindus and very orthodox. What I want to do is to make you more orthodox. The more orthodox you are, the more sensible, and the more you think of modern orthodoxy, the more foolish you are. Go back to your old orthodoxy, for in those days every sound that came from these books, every pulsation, was out of a strong, steady, and sincere heart, every note was true. After that came degradation in art, in science, in religion, in everything, national degradation. We have no time to discuss the causes, but all the books written about that period breed of the pestilence, the national decay, instead of vigor, only wails and cries. Go back to the old days when there was strength and vitality. Be strong once more, drink deep of this fountain of yore, and that is the only condition of life in India. According to the Advaitist, this individuality which we have today is a delusion. This has been a hard nut to crack all over the world. Forthwith you tell a man he is not an individual. He is so much afraid that his individuality, whatever that may be, will be lost. But the Advaitist says there never has been an individuality. You have been changing every moment of your life. You were a child and thought in one way. Now you are a man and think another way. Again you will be an old man and think differently. Everybody is changing. If so, where is your individuality? Certainly not in the body, or in the mind, or in thought. And beyond that is your Atman, and, says the Advaitist, this Atman is the Brahman itself. There cannot be two infinites. There is only one individual, and it is infinite. In plain words, we are rational beings, and we want to reason. And what is reason? More or less of classification, until you cannot go on any further, and the finite can only find its ultimate rest when it is classified into the infinite. Take up a finite thing and go on analyzing it, but you will find rest nowhere until you reach the ultimate or infinite, and that infinite, says the Advaitist, is what alone exists. Everything else is Maya, nothing else has real existence. Whatever is of existence in any material thing is this Brahman, we are this Brahman, and the shape and everything else is Maya. Take away the form and shape, and you and I are all one. But we have to guard against the word I. Generally people say, if I am the Brahman, why cannot I do this and that? But this is using the word in a different sense. As soon as you think you are bound, no more you are Brahman, the self, who wants nothing, whose light is inside. All his pleasures and bliss are inside, perfectly satisfied with himself. He wants nothing, expects nothing, perfectly fearless, perfectly free. That is Brahman. In that we are all one. Now this seems, therefore, to be the great point of difference between the dualist and the Advaitist. You find even great commentators like Shankaracharya making meanings of texts, which, to my mind, sometimes do not seem to be justified. Sometimes you find Ramanuj dealing with texts in a way that is not very clear. The idea has been even among our Pandits that only one of these sects can be true and the rest must be false, although they have the idea in the Shrutis, the most wonderful idea that India has yet to give to the world, that which exists is one, sages call it by various names. That has been the theme, and the working out of the whole of this life problem of the nation is the working out of that theme, yea, except a very few learned men, I mean, barring a very few spiritual men, in India, we always forget this. We forget this great idea, and you will find that there are persons among Pandits, I should think 98%, who are of opinion that either the Advaitist will be true, or the Vishishtadvaitist will be true, or the Dvaitist will be true, and if you go to Varanasi and sit for 5 minutes in one of the ghats there, you will have demonstration of what I say. You will see a regular bullfight going on about these various sects and things. Thus it remains. Then came one whose life was the explanation, whose life was the working out of the harmony that is the background of all the different sects of India, I mean Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. It is his life that explains that both of these are necessary, that they are like the geocentric and the heliocentric theories in astronomy. When a child is taught astronomy, he is taught the geocentric first and works out similar ideas of astronomy to the geocentric. But when he comes to finer points of astronomy, the heliocentric will be necessary and he will understand it better. Dualism is the natural idea of the senses. As long as we are bound by the senses, we are bound to see a God who is only personal and nothing but personal. We are bound to see the world as it is. Says Ramanuj, so long as you think you are a body, and you think you are a mind, and you think you are a jiva, every act of perception will give you the three, soul, and nature, and something as causing both. But yet, at the same time, even the idea of the body disappears where the mind itself becomes finer and finer, till it has almost disappeared, when all the different things that make us fear, make us weak, and bind us down to this body life have disappeared. Then and then alone one finds out the truth of that grand old teaching. What is the teaching? Even in this life they have conquered the round of birth and death, whose minds are firm fixed on the sameness of everything, for God is pure and the same to all, and therefore such are said to be living in God. Thus seeing the Lord the same everywhere, he, the sage, does not hurt the self by the self, and so goes to the highest goal.